Hello everybody, welcome to the series of webinars organized by Ecological under the framework of the Europeana initiative. Today the webinar is dedicated to digital sobriety and GLAMs, a new challenge. Climate change is one of the major and most complex issues, and the digital transformation of cultural institutions is an important element. At the same time, experts explain that digital technologies have an impact on the environment and the concept of digital sobriety is developing. So, how to conciliate digital transformation and climate change imperatives, as well as new European Bauhaus objectives? How to measure our ecological footprint? How can we make our practices evolve? What about existing practices such as the one initiated by the Europeana Climate Action Group or by other cultural and creative sectors, and what is this digital sobriety concept? So the webinar is aiming to contribute to the new European initiative and to the initiative and manifesto launched by the European Climate Action Group. The conversation will feature Barbara Fischer, Camille Pène, and Barnard. After all the presentations, we will open the discussion with all participants, but you can already list your questions in the chat, of course, and you will find as well in the chat the connection link to Mentimeter. So now we will begin the discussion with Barbara Fischer. Barbara Fischer is an art manager engaged in the valorization of the impact of cultural heritage by digital means, co-creating formats like the popular hackathon Coding Da Vinci. She works as liaison counsel at the German National Library to encourage cooperation and openness in digital transformation. And on behalf of the DNB, she initiated the Wiki Library Manifesto. And she also initiated the European Climate Action Group, who published a manifesto about climate change. So now, Barbara, the floor is yours.
That means not only the rise of temperature, but it also means pollution, like through chemical waste or plastic. I mean, they have now found plastic in our organs and in within our bodies, not just like in birds and in fishes, but within humans, because plastic is simply everywhere. It's also about mass extinction of our species, like flowers or mammals or insects. And those that feel that insects, they're so small, they're unimportant. No, they aren't. We need them as pollinators. We need them in order that our food grows and keeps on existing. And I also refer to, when I speak about climate change, to the overspending. I think today it's in a week. Most of the attendees, I assume, are coming from France. And in a week, we will have the overshoot day of France. That means that France will have, if everybody would work as friends, then what we have as natural resources and what could be regenerated within a year is already gone by 5th of May, and we still have so many days left of the year. So I will share with you a document where you can find all the references to what I'm saying. So we can see, like, the Anthropocene is really a complex thing. It is not something of the future, and it really concerns everybody of us, unless maybe we are older than 17, then we could think, oh, come on, it's not my problem. But I assume most of us, we are younger than that, and we do have children or grandchildren and all that. So we could say, well, but we leave this to politics. I mean, gee, that's why we have them, no? I mean, our politicians, Emile Macron or Olaf Scholz or all these people, that's why we elected them, and we leave it all to them. It's their problem. No, but I think we as GLAM institutions, we have to engage in ecological action as well, because we are threatened by the climate change. Look, for instance, buildings in Iraq, they're just brushed away by rising seas and increasing winds. We know that fighting climate change, the later it starts, the more it will cost, and that means less money for our institutions. It's as simple as that. If the impact of climate change is going to hit us really hard, this can be so immense that caring for culture could be considered the least important thing. Think of mass migration, of devastation by floods and the stifling heat, to just get an image. But why should GLAM institutions engage in climate action in particular? Well, as I said, we are both under threat, but we are also part of the problem. If you think foremost in tourism, where most of us are focused a lot, at least the museums and the galleries, we create or part of the 8% creation of the carbon footprint, global carbon footprint is due to tourism. And with our exhibitions and our activities, we contribute to that tourism and thus also to the emissions. And so we have to strive for a more ecological tourism, and maybe also focus more on our regional audience. The Tate Gallery in England has already started to do that, and thinking how could they turn their focus from an overarching global audience more to a regional audience and that focus. When we conceive exhibitions, we hardly think of the ecological footprint concerning both the architecture. Very often you'll find new things, new installations, and after the exhibitions, you will not reuse them again. So this is something where we could start to become more aware. You could also think about a more energy efficient lighting in your houses, in air conditioning, have a vegetarian canteen, carbon dioxide free catalog, plastic free merchandise, all these kind of things. This is where we as GLAM institution can really start to become more ecological prepared. And also when we take part in conferences, which is very important and we need to do so, we can maybe establish the practice, the train before the plane, especially within Europe. I just came back from Italy on train, and it was all feasible. It's possible, and it's getting better again. And for now, I think we will gonna hear more about that. Very few GLAM institutions are monitoring their ecological footprint. We have very little tools yet to do so. So this is something we have to focus more. And now if you think, well, but we are into the digital transformation and that changed everything, because I mean, my computer is a clean thing, and when I write in my computer, I don't produce paper, and this is all very fine. Well, that's only half of the story, because the other half is you use a lot of energy producing all these content, storing it for the hardware and the transmission. So, and lately we have started in the GLAM field to use the NFT technology in order to produce digital artworks as a fundraising method. British Museum has been very strong in that, and only by the little time they have used that, it was now 3 months I think, they have already consumed as much energy as a normal US household consumes in about 60 years, imagine, within these 3 months. So when you hear all that, and I'm really rushing you through because I want all of you to participate in debate, you might feel helpless, and you might feel, well, so what shall we do now and what could we do? And this is where we, within the Europeana initiative, started to think last summer and launched the Europeana Climate Manifesto. And the manifesto aims to assemble both the skills, the knowledge, and patterns and spirits of the foundation, the aggregators forum, and all its members, and of course the members of the Europeana Network Association, in order to call for action on 4 levels. The first level is planning. And by planning, we mean things like embed ecosystem or eco-thinking in your overall strategy. I mean, for now, we are very used to embed economic thinking in all our doings, right? Like, oh, how much does it cost? How could I reduce cost? Could it be cheaper if I do it this way? Should I maybe cooperate? What if you spend at least half of the energy that you spent into reducing the economic cost in reducing the ecological cost of what you are doing? That would be really helpful. The Natural History Museum of London, for instance, is doing that as soon as they have declared climate emergency in early 2020. They have altered the whole procedures in order to make sure that they really slow down their ecological footprint. We also need to collaborate. We are a huge, huge network, and we can learn from each other. We can show each other what we know. We can train each other. We can collaborate, and we can exchange information. Like the other day, I read about an initiative that is trying to build up a network of solar power driven servers around the world. So whenever the sun is shining in one part of the world, that server is turned on. And when the sun is going down, the next server is turning off where the sun comes. So these kind of initiatives will really help to go down with our energy. And of course, we can share our information on like a common platform for best practices that the European initiative launched last year. It was a climate action map, and where we are collecting best practices from all over Europe in order to make it more feasible to everybody. That is collaboration. The third one is operating. So that means what could you actually do within your institution? So referring to digital transformation, that could be like a digital cleanup. Think of what kind of procedures, processes, workflows within your institutions could be altered in order to reduce their carbon footprint. Like, do you need to have by default a message whenever your wiki has been changed, right? Is that necessary? Or do you have to upload the entire intranet to all your 500 employees whenever they start their computer in the morning? These are things we can think of and reduce heavily, both the server capacities and also the carbon footprint in general. But in my point of view, the most important action within this climate action setup is the advocacy, because we as GLAM institutions, we do have a strong communication power. People rely on us, they trust us, and if we use this power in order to inform, in order to motivate, in order to show what could you do, and advocate within our funders, our politicians, that climate action is not something we can leave to the next generations. We have to tackle it today. Then we do really make a change, and that's how we transform the world with culture in a better way by cooling it. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for this strong introduction. And yes, we invite you all to have a look on the manifesto. The link is on the chat. And now we will, just before giving the floor to Camille Pène, we will have an introductory Mentimeter. Marco, you can introduce it.
Yes, I put the link in the chat. If it doesn't work, you can copy paste it in your browser, and I'm gonna present. Tell me if you can see it. Okay. Now, in your opinion, what is the element that in the digital domain that has the most environmental impact? And as you can see, we've put 4 answers: emails, exchange of files, hardware, service. We can talk about each different option. I mean, for emails, we constantly exchange emails with our coworker, with our colleagues. We forward messages, so it's a constant sending messages. Does it really have an impact on an environmental level? Then exchange of files. I mean, when you have a different file that is copied in different clouds, if you have Drive, Apple Cloud, I mean, this has its weight. Then the hardware. I mean, we're talking about computers, the different concrete technology that you use, and then you have service that apparently is the most chosen option. I'm gonna leave you other 1 or 2 minutes to answer to the question, but I feel that it will be interesting for Camille to react to what we are seeing right now. And I feel like exchange of files is running high, but yeah, also the idea with service and the idea that we have right now with cryptocurrency and the whole concept of mining is something that could have an impact with the service. So maybe Camille, I think we can leave you the floor to comment a little bit on these answers.
Yeah, so Camille, just to introduce you, so you're the co-founder of Les Augures. And you're based in France. Camille supports organizations to meet the challenges of digital, social, and ecological transitions by designing collaborative innovation systems. And her passion for the avant-garde has led her from the contemporary art world to the innovation sector. She has worked at the MoMA, and as well as Cap Digital, and notably as director of the technological innovation festival Futur en Scène in Paris and Futures in Africa. So Camille, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Corinne and Marco. I'm not going to comment right now on the results of the quiz, but maybe my hope is that if you take it again after my presentation, the answer would be slightly different. Voila. So I have no slides. So thank you for the introduction, Corinne. I will just tell a little bit more about Les Augures Collective, which is the collective within I operate. So the Les Augures Collective was created in April 2020 and is made of 4 women, experts in cultural strategy, circular economy, eco-production, and innovation. And we are all experienced in the visual art sector and museums. And we gathered, so back in 2020, during the first phase of the pandemics, we gathered our expertise and experience to help cultural and artistic organizations to face the challenges brought by the climate crisis and the social ecological transitions, and to strengthen their capacity to adapt and to innovate. Previously, as you mentioned, Corinne, I worked in the technological field. I was the director for a major tech festival based in Paris. So I also have this background, and in a way I reoriented, because for me, I had to change my definition of innovation. And Les Augures, which is very French, it's the name of our collective. You can translate it as the omens. And we don't predict the future, but we can help cultural organization. I mean, we try to help cultural organization to be ready for it. And we work with major cultural institutions, all based in France right now, such as the Ministry of Culture, the Palais de Tokyo, the Centre National des Arts Plastiques, the Pinot Collection, to design and implement social and environmental strategies with them and for them. We also deliver training in eco-conception or sustainable communication and digital sobriety, which is today's topic. And I will share my perspective on digital sobriety and culture with you for approximately 10 minutes, as Marco asked me. And Marco, please stop me if I get carried away. And you may ask questions if you have any during the Q&A session. So just before I start, a little disclaimer. I speak from a French perspective. As I said, I've been working for 2 years in France with French institutions and organizations. So all the knowledge and expertise I have gathered from the ground is from a French perspective. Also, the data I rely on is calculated based on the French low carbon electricity mix. It's not the same mix, for instance, in Germany. And also, I want to apologize because my English is rusty. And so I want to thank Michael Culture for giving me the opportunity to practice again, but mostly to share my thoughts with you on this topic and hopefully to discuss it with you. So the title I gave to my presentation is Ecological Transition and Digital Sobriety Towards Sustainable Innovation in Culture. So sustainable innovation is a difficult equation if you put digital technology in the mix. And I will explore with you today the contradictory demands that the cultural sector is facing as we are just emerging from the pandemics, and which crystallize in the goal of achieving digital sobriety. Because what do we see? On the one hand, we see that the pandemics that has led to the closing of cultural venues, including museums, has accelerated the digitalization of practices, both inside organizations, and I'm referring, for instance, to remote work, and on the user side. You know the boom of Netflix and YouTube that was already like before the pandemics, but that really exploded during the pandemics. And at the same time, and we can date it back to 2020 as well, the awareness of the climate crisis has risen among cultural professionals, and several institutions have started to face the challenges it brings. And I'm saying 2020, but for instance, the Tate Gallery has declared climate emergency back in 2019. So it's been a few years. And so the cultural sector is just at loss about how to act towards a digital strategy, a sustainable strategy that should include digital sobriety, because there's a real contradiction between sobriety and technology. First, I would like to give a little context, even though Barbara has really given a really interesting and context and underlined the catastrophe we're facing. We do nothing. But the context for our discussion about digital sobriety is that the Paris Agreement urges all industries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 60%, approximately by 2030. And this includes the cultural industry. Reduction objectives could not be clearer, as well as the catastrophe we are facing if we do nothing. But my question is, how can the cultural sector achieve these goals, and what does that imply in terms of transformation of production ways, audience engagement strategies, and revenue models? So the first step of action is data collection and measurement, especially because the cultural field is not considered as very polluting. Like nobody will say that a museum is very carbon emissive, unlike fashion or transportation. However, the cultural sector has a stronger impact than one may think, because it is at the heart of very emissive activities. In France, there's a think tank named the Shift Project that is advocating the shift to a post-carbon economy. And this think tank, the Shift Project, has really looked at the cultural sector in details to understand its impact, its environmental impact. And it has conducted several interviews with cultural organizations and analyzed carbon reports of several cultural organizations in France to understand better the impact of the sector. It has gathered a good number of data in spite of very few responses from museums. And the reason why there are very few responses from museums has two main reasons, I guess. First, there's no really habit of collecting data in museum, even less data about carbon emissions. And so they can't share it because they don't have it. And the other reason is that some museums had data, but they would not share it because it's too political. But so, even though there were few responses, the SHIFT project analyzed the answer and identified 6 major causes of environmental impact. First, mobility. 99% of the Musée du Louvre carbon report that dates back to 2016 comes from international visitor transportation. Then the next impact is building and energy. Next, food, production, waste, and last but not least, digital technologies, including infrastructure, but also communication and all the strategy to engage the audience. As you may know, digital technologies are responsible for 4% of greenhouse gas emission, and its energy consumption is increasing by 9% a year. So right now, digital technology of maybe one of the 6 major impacts caused by the cultural sector on the environment, but it's increasing. And when you think that in 2018, video watching represent as much CO2 emission as Spain, and that this impact is increasing, you can only imagine. And all this video watching is mostly video on demand, video games, TV, musical streaming, all that is culture. And so we can say that more than 50% of internet traffic is due to cultural practices. So that means that digital is one of the major impacts of culture and one of the major challenges for ecological transition in the culture, which puts the cultural sector in a conflicted situation, when at the same time digitalization is really encouraged by public funding, and especially European funding, but also French public funding as the only path towards innovation, as the only way to engage communities and young audiences. So it's hard to act. What can the cultural sector do? Should it go digital or not digital? How can the cultural field appropriate the notion of digital sobriety and its best practices without giving up on innovation? So in order to act and to design an action plan, let's try to better understand the environmental impact of digital technologies. And this is when maybe I will give a bit more insight on the answers you gave to the quiz. So I said just before that technology is responsible for 4% of greenhouse gas emissions, and this number is increasing. But greenhouse gas emissions is not the only environmental impact that technology has. Of all the environmental impacts, abiotic resource depletion, the carbon footprint, ionizing radiation tied to energy consumption, as well as the depletion of abiotic resources, that is minerals and metals, emerge as digital technology predominant effect on the environment. So it's not only carbon footprint, it's also the use of resources such as rare earth materials, water, all of that. And also what's important to know is that of all the stages of the life cycles of the goods and services being considered, the production phase has the biggest footprint, followed by the utilization phase. So that's important to have in mind that the production is the biggest impact. And why is it the biggest impact? why does it have such a large impact is because it takes a great deal of energy to produce the devices that deliver the digital services. And that the fabrication of this equipment uses vast quantities of rare earths. So that means that the correct answer to the quiz was hardware. It is the fabrication of the hardware that has the most impact on the environment. But environmental impact of new technology, even though it's alarming, it's not the only reason why we should question our intensive use of technology in culture. The use of technology also has political impacts, as you know. Workers' rights are violated around the production of services and goods. There are also tensions arising regarding the supply of materials, and also the use we do of Facebook and Twitter and other platforms brings many questions about the sovereignty of cultural goods. And also, the use of technology has social impacts that we should question. It creates digital divide and social exclusion, as well as it creates inclusion. It also brings question around data protection of users, and there are also health risks and cognitive disorders caused by addictions, exposure to waves that we tend to overlook. And so at the same time, awareness, because you're not learning anything by what I'm just saying. So at the same time, this awareness is rising around digital technology limits and all the risk it brings. We saw an acceleration of digitalization of cultural organization and in cultural habits. For instance, artists are exploring new aesthetics right now around virtual reality and metaverse, and exploring more and more immersive experiences that are super consuming in terms of carbon footprint. Also, cultural organizations are digitalizing more and more their programs, their collections. They propose 3D virtual visits. They live stream a lot. They also use data and marketing to better know their audiences. And they're also exploring new revenue models with e-commerce and NFT, such as the British Museum or also I forgot the name of the big Vienna Museum. Sorry, that has all the Klimt. So there's these two movements going sideways, and it's going parallel, and it's really an issue. Are there solutions? So there are best practices for digital sobriety, and I'm going to share a few with you. Considering that devices and televisions in particular are responsible for 65% to 90% of the environmental footprint of technology, the first way to act is to extend to the maximum the equipment life. The second thing to do, and it's the responsibility of IT departments in cultural organizations, is to implement a sustainable purchasing policy. For instance, to select responsible suppliers, but there are also other ways to do it. An answer also to that is to mutualize infrastructures on a local ground or city ground, to share equipment through cooperatives, also to use recycling centers or to adopt equipment leasing. And also one good practices is to eco-design digital services and products such as websites or services to engage audiences. There are also good practices on the user side, that is to take care of the IT material to longer equipment life. Also, considering that video is super emissive, to try to moderate broadcast of video, or also to moderate binging sessions, not to make it a daily habit, for instance, to watch YouTube or Netflix. And there's also maybe a responsibility to select tools and services that have strong commitments around the environment, or the respect of users' data. But what I really want to underline is that a list of best practices won't be enough to tackle the digital sobriety challenge in culture. we need to opt out from an all technology vision. The best practice of all, among all that I mentioned, is to slow down our use of technology and to give up also on some tech practices. What we could try to do is to identify the real needs for digital technologies and to invest in a low-tech narrative with artists and institutions. What is low-tech? Low-tech is not no-tech. Low-tech is the contrary of high-tech, which is sort of the system in which we are living right now. Low-tech is products, services, or processes and other systems that allow, through technological but also organizational or cultural transformation, to develop new society models with fundamental principles that are strong viability and sustainability and resilience. So that's quite the contrary of what we are doing right now. And I think cultural organizations have a strong responsibility to promote low-tech narratives because they are at the crossroads of public sector, new tech suppliers, I mean startups, and audiences, and they can be really influential to be some sort of diplomat with public authorities, cultural ministries, for instance, also to collaborate with cultural startups and to educate audiences around digital sobriety. So my conclusion is that between going all digital or giving up digital, there is a third path, and that is to find a sustainable use of digital technologies to support the cultural sector in its mission. Today's mission is mostly of cultural sector is mostly the preservation of art, to support new forms of art, and to educate and engage diverse audience. But if we really want to achieve digital sobriety, maybe we should rethink the mission of museums and culture in general. That is, that all these cultural venues could be a laboratory for ecological transition at a local level, a place to debate and to invent ecological transition, to experiment with new practices and new tools and new cohabitations that redefine the space for digital technology in our societies. Thank you. And I hope I wasn't too long.
No, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Camille, for this very inspiring presentation. And we see what a lot we have to do, in fact, to transform our own, own habits, also professional habits, attitudes, and how we have to adapt the way we work to this digital sobriety needs, and what is also very important is that we have to follow these issues of climate change and digital sobriety while maintaining, the new relation with audiences, diversity, access to diverse cultural heritage, and the communities who are working on digital cultural heritage. For us, it's a very, strong challenge because we are really at the middle of this complexity. And so one important point that you talk about as well as Barbara is that we have to balance our global ecological footprint, not only carbon footprint or let's say our technological footprint, but really we need to measure all our activity in this ecological perspective, and we need maybe new tools to do so, because there are some existing tools, but measuring parts, carbon footprint or digital footprint, etc. But we need to find a way to to do kind of self-assessment of this perspective. And now we are happy, sorry, we are happy to give the floor to Dan, and just to really to have also experience from other sectors, because it's really very important that in this climate change challenge, we work together with other domains, other experience, to share the practices and observations. And then you're one of the 3 lead artists of Fast Familia. It's an interdisciplinary collaboration comprising expertise in theater, facilitation, and creative computing. And your artwork, The Justice Syndicate, was selected for the Aesthetica Art Prize Anthology and longlisted for the LUTHEM Prize. You are quite famous. You have an article on the Financial Times and as one of the top 10 arts experience of lockdown. And the New York Times described your immersive courtroom drama, The Evidence Chamber, as relentless innovation. So, well done. And so now we, please, give you the floor.
Thank you very much. I think that Marco is going to share some slides for me. So I'm going to just do that annoying thing of saying next slide periodically. But yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. Let's see if this works. Yay, cool, bro. Cool.
There is an echo down.
Is everybody muted? Is maybe somebody unmuted? Bro, is that better? Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So the second slide, please. Thank you. That was great. Cool. Yeah. So as Corinne was saying, we are Fast Familia. She gave a wonderful introduction to us. Thank you for that. This talk has 3 parts. So I will start with some case study interviews that we did with artists doing fascinating things in the field of digital technology and ecology. And then I will talk about some of the efforts that we have been making within Fast Familia with our own digital sobriety. And then finally, I will talk about a tool that we created to help others measure the footprint of their digital activities. So yeah, next slide, please. So we've been working over the past year or so on a project called the Networks Condition, which has been about the environmental impact of digital cultural production. This project is part of a project that was organised by Arts Council England, so the arts funding body in the UK, and also Julie's Bicycle, who are kind of an English version of Les Augures, which I said very badly, apologies for my rusty French. Also, we did it in collaboration with 2 other arts organisations, a festival called Abandon Normal Devices and an arts organisation called Arts Catalyst. So this project has involved our attempts to lower the impact of our own work across the 3 organisations and this series of case studies. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend long on this because Barbara and Camille have covered this in a lot of detail, but just to say that the environmental impacts of digital things are often hidden and far away. Awa Madawi recently wrote, "Digital technology has ushered in an age of inconspicuous consumption. It's easy to understand the environmental impact of buying stuff or flying across the Atlantic, but harder to wrap your head around how much energy it takes to fly data across the web." So yeah, it's something that's dependent on electricity, is dependent on mining, and actually a lot of the things that are most fashionable and trendy are the most polluting. So for example, machine learning and also NFTs, which we've already touched on today. Next slide, please. So yeah, this section is about the case study interviews that we did. And next slide, please. The first of these case studies was with the artists Vadon Jolet and Kate Crawford about their project Anatomy of an AI. I do suggest Googling all of these things. There's quite a lot about them on the web. But this project breaks down the Amazon Echo as an anatomical map of human labor, data, and planetary resources. So Vladan painstakingly researched all of the materials, the human labor, and the data that went into one Amazon Echo. And he visited lots of the locations and met a lot of the humans involved along the way. Next slide. Some of the key points that he said in that case study included I won't read all of these because of time, but I think in the second paragraph, it's quite interesting where he says, if you start to think about infrastructures, data centers and everything, then you eventually get to the mines in Congo or elsewhere on the globe. And then the questions aren't the same anymore, because before it was about privacy, security, data exploitation, this kind of stuff. But when you start to think from the position of supply chains, then the main problem is a problem of labor and a problem of nature. He says, I spent some time in India going to investigate some illegal mining operations, and then in China. I've been in a village in India where they're managing e-waste, and there was a family and the father was lying on the bed having tremors because of the fumes, but still continuing to be there and work there. And he also calls on the EU in its research they're doing into AI and the ethics of AI to also look into into how AI can not just be practical and help us, but also the ethics of it, the labor that goes into it, and all those kinds of things. And he echoed what Camille was saying, that extending the life of the objects that we have is one of the most important priorities, rather than just buying new things and throwing them away. Next slide, please. So the next case study that we did was with the artist Joanna Mull, who has these amazing net-based artworks, which you can actually visit on her website. But this is a piece called CO2 that she created, which is a real-time net-based installation that displayed the amount of CO2 emitted each second, thanks to global visits to google.com. And next slide, please. And then this piece called Deforest, which is a net-based piece that shows the number of trees needed to absorb the global amounts of CO2 generated by global visits to google.com every second. So when you go to that web page, just these trees just appear across your screen in this amazing kind of flow across the screen to make you realize quite how much is needed to combat what's happening currently. Next slide, please. So I won't probably read everything, all these key quotations, but one of the things that she said was that I decided that I'd been working with numbers for a long time, trying to calculate emissions and so on, but I felt like I couldn't truly connect with it. Numbers can tell you a lot, but you can't really apprehend what this really means. And that's when Deforest came to life, because I wanted to find a way to do that. I feel that we can all relate to a tree, we can all understand what that means. We've all seen trees, and it's dramatic how our online world, especially when it comes to data, how invisible it is. At the bottom of the screen, this slide, she also in her own work tries to reduce the amount of megabytes per page or per interaction on her website and her browser-based artwork. So she's not just raising awareness about these things, she's also lowering the emissions within her artworks themselves. Next slide, please. She also makes this really interesting point about the data that is just left there online, that your sort of your traces that just last for years. So, for example, if you ever use Second Life, your avatar is probably still there, and it's just using energy existing there, that data unnecessarily. All these photographs that are there on the internet just taking up space. And she also talks about the kind of the design challenge of setting as a design challenge to her students to create a work in the most ecological way possible, and how that can be a really creative design challenge for creative people. Next slide, please. So the next case study we did was with Kyle McDonald, who is an internationally renowned digital artist from the US, who's done quite a lot of work on the environmental impacts of machine learning. I won't read all these tweets that he did, but he basically writes about this one experience where overnight he had been running a machine learning program and was really viscerally felt the heat of it in terms of how much energy it had used the following morning. So yeah, let's go to the next slide and then skip that and go to the slide after. So yeah. So he created this piece called NVIDIA CO2, which was a site-specific artwork within the tools that machine learning programmers actually use, but to show them estimates for their computer usage in the equivalencies of things like sea ice loss per hour, grams of beef consumed, number of light bulbs, and so on, to really try and help these people who are working with machine learning understand the impact of what they're doing. He's also currently working on this project that's about the crypto art platforms, so the NFT platforms, which are obviously very, very big emitters. And he's actually working to create for one of those platforms an artwork that he will sell on there, that will have, he will set the price as the price needed to offset all of the emissions ever from that platform. And he's working with this company called Tradewater, who work with the CFCs, which are in refrigerators and are very, very, very polluting greenhouse gas. So to work with them to remove those and safely. And he's actually created an artwork which will have one of those refrigerant canisters inside the actual art piece itself, then sell that art piece and use the money to then do that amazing piece of offsetting. So that's a very sort of creative, artistic response to this problem. And next slide, please. So the final case study I wanted to talk about from other artists is Memo Akten, who's an artist who was born in Istanbul, studied in London, is now based in the US. And he works with emerging technologies and computation as a medium to create images, sounds, films, and large-scale installations and performances. So you can see here that in less than 6 months, one artist's multi-edition NFTs had a footprint of 160 tons of CO2 equivalent, which is the same as an EU resident's entire electricity consumption for 77 years, or it's also the equivalent to flying for 1,500 hours. So the scale of some of these NFTs is really beyond other things. Next slide, please. So one of the things he said in his interview with us is, I'm concerned that people weren't aware of how these proof of work blockchains worked. Many of the artists getting into the NFT space weren't aware of the ecological impacts of the data mining industry. It's not just in terms of emissions, it's also e-waste. They thought uploading an NFT was maybe like tweeting or putting a video on YouTube or Tumblr or Instagram, and it's not. A tweet is something like a few grams of CO2. Watching an hour of Netflix is tens of grams of CO2, whereas an NFT is tons. So it's many orders of magnitude different. He wrote a guide to listing a number of eco-friendly NFTs, and he says that e-waste is created by Bitcoin mining because it's so profitable. So yeah, one thing to say is if anybody has Bitcoin is very damaging to the environment. So that's another thing to also think about, because it's using a lot of the same kind of technology, and there's all these devices being bought to do this mining that are only bought to do this mining. They have to buy new ones every year and then throw them away to compete with the other people doing the Bitcoin mining. Anyway, that's enough of the tangent on Bitcoin. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is just where I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did in terms of our own digital projects. Next slide, please. So the acquisitions panel is a piece that we created, which is an interactive performance exploring how we choose the stories we tell about the past. So 12 audience members take on the role of citizens acquisitions panel, who are trying to help a museum make decisions about what to display and how to display it. In front of them is an object with a complex colonial past. And yeah, so they have these kind of discussions with each other during the piece. Next slide, please. So
Dan, we have to accelerate because we are out of time.
Perfect. Is it 1 more minute, did you say?
Thank you.
Yeah, 1 more minute? So yeah, so we realized that we did some analysis on some of the energy use of the piece, and we realized that the video syncing systems within this piece were the thing that was using the most energy. So we rewrote the code for that, and it now has uses only 10% the power of boiling a mug of water in a kettle to run one of those performances. So that's really, really working with the code base to diminish the code in that piece. And then finally, can we go to 5 slides ahead, Marco? Something like that. Yeah, again, next one. Yeah. So final thing to share is we built this tool called the networkcondition.com, which is a free to use tool, which is very quick, very intuitive, but it's to help you think about lowering the impact of your digital carbon footprint for a project that you do. So you just quickly put in how long you're working on it, whether you're working on a laptop or a computer. And then also you put in things like how many meetings did we have? Did we meet online? Did we travel to a meeting? How did we do a live stream? So something like this. How many people attended the live stream? How long did it last? And then it plugs out a number of the carbon footprint, and then you can go back and you can change things. And there are also links on there to sort our sources and places to go for advice on how to lower your impact. So yeah, sorry that was slow, but I had a lot I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was very, very interesting. Thanks a lot to the three of you, the speakers, Barbara, lived. But okay, so if you have any questions, I mean, you can raise your hand. No question, no comments. Pier Giacomo?
Oh yeah, but just a question that thanks once more about all the presentation. Of course, we were trying also to organize some educational activities focused on this issue in order to transfer, let's say, the principle. If you have any suggestions, some recommendation about existing materials, courses, everything that can be useful in order to spread out information and raise awareness about this issue.
I think the question is for the three of, I mean.
Yeah, exactly. That is the reason.
I'm embarrassed because all the I know a lot of resources, but all the resources I'm using are creating are in French.
Well,
So,
never mind. French is a perfect language.
okay, well, in France, you have on this topic, you have I'd say a few, like maybe two or three major think tanks working on the topic of digital sobriety that can be also really helpful for cultural organizations. So first you have the think tank I mentioned, the Shift Project, that is really analyzing the carbon footprint of the digital technologies activities. You have also another think tank, which name is Institut du numérique responsable. And this think tank produces really, I would say, practical resources. You have a calculator to calculate your the footprint of your digital activities. You have also a MOOC. You have to learn more about it. You have also a referential of all the good practices. And the third one I wanted to mention is Green IT. Green IT is also a think tank working to evaluate the environmental impact of digital sobriety. And right now with Les Augures, we are trying to work on adapting all this material, all these resources for the cultural sector. And we are launching a lab called Augure Lab Numérique Responsable, together with an agency specialized in digital sobriety to really create a set of resources, especially for the cultural community.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Just one comment, Camille. You can type on the chat the names you refer to, and say also Suzanne Azan is here, and she's also in the climate group from Europeana. and I think that we in this group this is something that we have to do and share maybe with all the communities. I mean, a list of guides or evaluation, indicators, etc. Or that could be very useful. Maria Teresa?
No, I wanted to say that we learned about a lot of initiatives, and at the end, the best would be to arrive to have like a toolkit with the guidelines and examples to share with all the cultural institutions. Like to have a toolkit in progress. This would be something that would be very useful for even in English, possibly, but starting from cases in various languages. But we can, if we can arrive to have a toolkit in English, then it can be translated in other languages, and it can be useful for all the cultural institutions.
Yeah,
I think that as MCA we can help perhaps in this in spreading all this information.
Sure, and with Europeana climate
yes
group. And Suzanne, I see that your hand is raised if you want to speak.
Yeah. Maria Teresa, first of all, so good to see you, and Pier Giacomo, so good to see my dear friends. Maria Teresa, let's work together on this. Come back and work with Europeana, with our climate action group. It'll be really great to work on the guidelines. It's something that's in our agenda. It's something that, the tradition of Europeana and the different communities, we're just setting out. We're taking our first baby steps. So yeah, please come and join us. All of you come and join us.
Thank you, Suzanne. So if there is any other questions, we have to leave you there. Just thanks to all, to the participants, to the speakers. We will send you back the list of all the initiatives that are in the chat, and we will work with also Suzanne with the Europeana group. And just to let you know that the next webinar will be a training webinar, and it will be on the 7th of June, and it will be about basic training on Wikidata as a complementary tool to enrich metadata. Voilà. So thanks a lot to all of you. Have a nice day, and see you very soon. Ciao, ciao.